Hello, hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for coming to Field Arts and Events Hall. Hi, my name is Steve Rader Ginsburg, and I'm Executive and Artistic Director here. I want to welcome you to the First Fed Community Conversation, The Importance of Local Journalism. This community conversation is inspired by the life of John Brewer, whom many of this room have been touched and inspired by him. I also would like to recognize that we are on the lands of the Klallam and Nisquallam people, the original peoples of this land. Thanks again for coming tonight. We do have another First Fed Community Conversation next month. It's called Cinemental with Joshua Jones and Jeff Jones. They are doing a community conversation about how mental health shows up in cinema and what we can learn about depictions of mental health and taking care of ourselves and mental health in our community. So we invite you to come back for that. Please join our mailing list to stay in touch. And if you're interested in supporting our work, become a member. We also have our annual gala coming up. I'm going to introduce Aaron Kennedy, who is going to set the tone for the evening. Aaron Kennedy has received the mantle of being publisher here for Peninsula Daily News, worked with John Brewer, and was mentored by John Brewer. So Aaron Kennedy is a media professional with nearly 40 years of experience in journalism and publishing. She currently serves as the regional publisher of the Peninsula Daily News, Squim Gazette, and Forks Forum. Aaron began her career in Vancouver, rising to senior leadership roles, and later helped guide major publications in Hawaii. Known for her collaborative, community-centered leadership, she's served on numerous nonprofit and civic boards. A North Olympic Peninsula resident for the past decade, Aaron is deeply committed to keeping local communities informed, connected, and engaged. Please welcome Aaron Kennedy.
Wow, thank you so much for being here tonight, everyone. Good evening and welcome to Field Arts and Events Hall and the Donna M. Morris Theater. At the heart of this gathering is a singular purpose, honoring the legacy of John Brewer. John was more than just our former publisher and editor. He was a standard bearer for humanitarianism and the craft of journalism. He understood that a community is not only as strong as the information it shares, but also one that shares their heart as well. We are here tonight to ensure his passion for the truth continues to inspire the next generation. I want to extend a special thanks to Steve Rader Ginsburg for organizing this event, for First Fed for their ongoing sponsorship of these community conversations, and most importantly, a heartfelt welcome to John's wife, Barbara Wise, who is with us here tonight. Barbara, how nice to see you, and John's family. I can speak directly to you by saying thank you for sharing John with us for so many years and for your grace in helping us keep his vital legacy alive. Alongside the importance of journalism, John believed in community service, a spirit that continues to ripple through our region in remarkable ways. The Peninsula Home Fund, just today, our committee met with the Olympic View Foundation to review 22 grant applications. That's up 8 from last year. Thank you. Thanks to the generosity of our subscribers, we will soon award over $120,000 to neighbors in need in our community. So thank you for your generous donations on behalf of John Brewer and the team at the Peninsula Daily News. The Clallam County Community Service Awards is something else I wanted to touch on tonight. We are proud to continue this program alongside the Seroptimus International of Port Angeles Noon Club, and our newest partner, the Boys and Girls Club of Clallam County. This year, we've expanded to honor our youth leaders as well, and please join us to celebrate these local heroes on May the 6th at the Port Angeles Senior Center. I'd also like to touch on a life-saving tribute, thanks to Ed Bedford. You may have seen recently of Bedford Craft Sodas. A significant donation was made recently to the Forks Swiftwater Rescue Program in John's name. This is a deeply meaningful tribute. As many of you know, we lost John in a tragic boating accident in 2024. This contribution ensures John's name is forever linked to this project, to a project that protects those who enjoy our local waters. Now I want to touch on the future of the PDN. Tonight is more than the industry of news. It is the pulse of our community. Since 1916, yes, doing the math, that's 90 years. The PDN has served as the eyes and ears of the North Olympic Peninsula. While how we deliver the news has changed over the years, our mission to keep you informed and connected has never wavered. We are currently in a season of transition. We recently moved our headquarters into a new space. Although it was a sad farewell to our old location, this new space offers us a way to be streamlining our physical footprint. But our focus has never been sharper. Our primary goal remains the creation of original, local, verified content. The stories you won't find on a national news app. While print landscapes shift, we are energized by our growth. Our website traffic is the largest on the Olympic Peninsula, and digital subscribers, app usage, and social media engagement continue to grow year after year. As we look toward the future, we also do so with heavy hearts. This past year, we lost a titan in our newsroom, a legend of our community, photojournalist Keith Thorpe, as many of you know. For 3 decades, Keith just didn't take pictures. He captured the soul of Clallam and Jefferson counties, whether he was standing on a rain-slicked sideline or capturing the majesty of the Olympics. Keith saw the world with the clarity and kindness few possess. He was a quiet, unassuming person who mentored many and served as visual historian of our lives. In my mind, Keith has joined John's legacy. I can still hear John saying over this shoulder, just backstopping. And now Keith has joined him, and he says, I'll see what I can do over this shoulder. Well, we miss them both dearly. To lead into tonight's conversation, I'm also pleased to introduce a true veteran of the Peninsula media and a man who literally wrote the history of our industry, Brown Maloney. Brown will be our moderator tonight, and he is the owner of Port Angeles-based Radio Pacific, which operates KONP and 2 additional stations in Sequim. Many of you know him as a retired 23-year owner and publisher of the Sequim Gazette and the Forks Forum. In addition to his career as publisher, Brown is a dedicated historian of our craft. He's authored A History of News Media on the North Olympic Peninsula, which provides a definitive account of how journalism has shaped our region. And I believe, and I'm sure Brown will testify to this, that there are a few stories about John in there as well. His commitment to community extends well beyond the newsroom. He is noted humanitarian and proud recipient of the Sequim Chamber's Citizen of the Year Award. His experience spans the West Coast, from daily papers to Anchorage, Sacramento, Fresno, and serving on boards of the McClatchy Company and the Seattle Times. Brown has also served as president of the Washington Newspapers Association. So from me, I would like to thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for being here tonight and for your support of local journalism. Please join me in welcoming our moderator, Brown Maloney.
Good job. Good job. You know, for this part, I'm going to stand up here, and three others, why don't you take the first three seats? These are our panelists. Thank you, Aaron, and thank you for being here. It's just great. And let me just say, while our world has evolved and changed over the years, make no mistake, the news media has evolved and changed too. However, now more than ever, it seems its very existence is being threatened. Communities, municipalities, governments, elected officials, local decision makers, all who affect the lives of citizens, these institutions, these human beings need community oversight. The trusted voices of our local media have always provided this. This is now being challenged, and the news media is getting pushed back. Make no mistake, on a regional, national, and world scale, there is also pushback happening there as well. The right for citizens to be fully informed has never been more at risk. With me tonight, I have three esteemed journalists recognizing both local and regional, as well as statewide news outlets. First of all, I want to recognize Briar. Raise your hand. Briar Dudley is from the Seattle Times. Briar is a graduate of Whitman College and has completed fellowships at UC Berkeley's Knight Digital Media Center, as well as the East-West Center. Professionally, Briar has spent 23 years as a member of the editorial staff with the Seattle Times. His early years with the Times was spent as a reporter, senior reporter, then a beat specifically chronicling the growth of Pacific Northwest tech firms. He has served on the editorial board as well, and Briar is now editor of the Save the Free Press initiative, a beat specific to the Seattle Times newspaper. In the first 10 years of his career, going backwards, not from the very beginning, before the Seattle Times, he was at the Tacoma News Tribune, then the Yakima Herald Republic, and then as a kid out of college, the Sequim Gazette. So, thank you for starting your career, Briar, here on the peninsula.
Oh,
that's great.
thank you for launching it, Brown.
Joining us is Amy Jeffries. Amy, raise your hand. Amy is a representative of the news media, specifically the broadcast division. KNKX Public Radio is licensed in Tacoma. You might recognize KPLU. KPLU is now KNKX and has been for, Amy could tell you, a little while now. So that just puts things in perspective for you. It is owned by Pacific Public Media and is a community-based nonprofit organization. KNKX has a big reach. Not only does the station serve the Puget Sound region, but it has broadcast translators in a good dozen other Washington locations. Some locations, for example, Aberdeen, Bellingham, Longview, Olympia, Mount Vernon, and yes, Port Angeles. You can hear KNKX at 89.3 on the dial FM. Amy is the radio station's assistant news director and oversees daily news coverage and investigative reporting both. With her leadership, the KNKX newsroom won the 2024 Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence and the Sigma Delta Chi Award for investigative reporting from the National Society of Professional Journalists. Well done, Amy. Amy is a graduate of Wesleyan University and has a master's in journalism from UC Berkeley. Okay, I guess you can guess who the third person is. He doesn't need to raise his hand, but raise your hand, Lloyd. Lloyd doesn't get the long distance award, although it's kind of a little ways down the road. He is a second-generation newspaper publisher and comes from a family recognized by the Smithsonian for its role in community journalism. Even my family didn't get that award, Lloyd. Son of a gun. You've got big shoes to fill. In 2016, at age 28, Lloyd purchased the Port Townsend Leader, becoming the youngest newspaper publisher in Washington state history. He has subsequently been named to editor and publisher's 25 under 35 list, recognizing emerging leaders in the industry. Lloyd has worked in every part of the newspaper business, and by the way, I hope so, Lloyd, if you're working for a weekly newspaper. It's an essential when you own and operate a weekly newspaper. Lloyd is optimistic about the future of community journalism with his leadership. The Port Townsend Leader, by the way, has always been one of the stronger weeklies in the state, and nothing has changed with Lloyd. In fact, the Port Townsend Leader has increased revenue by 20% annually over the past 3 years, reinforcing his belief in the importance of local ownership backed by strong local news. Welcome, Lloyd. We're going to start with, just give you a little idea here how it's working. We're going to be here about an hour and a half, and we hope to have the last 30 to 40 minutes be for Q&A. We really want this to be interactive. So we're going to do we brought some questions together that we think are important questions and relevant to today, and in the importance of journalism and the challenges we face. Also speaking to the importance of local journalism. So, but basically, and I'm going to join you guys here, but why don't we go in this order? Briar, you first, and then Amy, and then Lloyd. Each of you guys, just give us a little elevators information, a little insight into your news organization and why specifically you are in the line of work you are in. Briar.
Yes, well, Seattle Times is the largest newsroom still in Washington State. We have about 170 people still covering local news, statewide news, and beyond. We have recently reopened our Washington, D.C. bureau, which is fantastic. I have a weird job at the Seattle Times. The publisher about 4 or 5 years ago asked me to lead this public service initiative to raise public awareness of the local journalism crisis and advocate for solutions. I am biased. I do this on the opinion page. I don't hold back there. That's separate from the news pages, which strive to be objective. We can talk about that in the Q&A if you like. But I write columns on Thursdays and Sundays. I have a free newsletter. We have a dedicated web page. You can find out more about this at st.news/SaveTheFreePress. The newsletter's free, and it's been a fascinating beat to be on. I think I'm the only person writing about this full-time in a newspaper in the United States. The industry does a terrible job covering itself and covering the problems it has. But there are a lot of people who are really concerned about it. Majority of Americans are worried about the state of the free press. More than 70% of Americans, according to Pew Research, still trust local news and value what we do. So you obviously are among that group, and thank you very much for coming out to have this conversation with us.
I'm Amy Jeffries, and I work for what is now known as KNKX. We actually are celebrating our 10th anniversary of independence from Pacific Lutheran University in Tacoma, which used to hold our broadcast license. So that's how you knew us as KPLU previously. It is awesome to be working for a community-supported, community licensed broadcaster that exists because of community support. It's what helped the station to purchase its broadcast license those years ago, and it is what is sustaining the station now. I have spent most of my journalism career in public radio working for other local stations. Did a little detour in there for a couple of years working for a couple of digital media startups. I'm always happy to talk about that. One was global and one was hyperlocal. So there you go with that. What else can I say? I think that's kind of a place to start. My career also began around, it started in 2001, and the trajectory of things has happened since then. I was in the greater New York metropolitan area at the time, September 11th. And I would say that I think I've stayed in journalism because I believe in the power of shared facts, and because it gives me a purpose in processing what is happening in the world and helping other people get the information and navigate it
Amy, real
too.
quick,
Yeah.
how often is your voice on the radio? I'm sure
Almost
people...
never.
Well, no,
So, oh yes.
I don't think that's completely true, is it?
Well, it's mostly true. Well, I should say a couple of times a day you will hear my voice in the legal ID.
Didn't you just have Briar? Well, maybe you
I
didn't
had
do the
Briar
interview.
on. I was editing. So as the assistant news director, and in most of my career since I left grad school, I've been an editor and leading news teams. So I'm in the background supporting reporters and helping to make choices about what stories we're covering. So you don't hear me on the air very often, except during fund drives where I talk a lot.
Thank you. So,
Thank you for your support.
For someone that's always saying, please listen to 1450 AM and 107 FM, please, it's okay, and by all means, 90, 89.3 FM here, and I think your repeater is just east of town, just west of town here, yes.
Yeah.
Lloyd.
Oh, my turn. Hey, I'm Lloyd. I guess I grew up in the business. Hated every second of it until the economy was in the tank in about 2010, and I had the pleasure of taking advantage of nepotism, and my dad gave me a job. And then, it turns out I love the industry. I came to Port Townsend back in, I think, 2016. I asked Scott Wilson, who was the owner at the time, if he would mentor me, and he said no. How about you buy it instead? So that's how I ended up here.
Good. And from someone, myself, who came from the newspaper business, with my family, I was 22 years old. We took an 80% stake in the Anchorage Daily News, and the family quickly just said, send the kid to Alaska. And it was good. But thank you, Lloyd. That's great. And his family, too, Dave Gogger, who I know, who helped facilitate the sale. I was introduced to what his family does through Dave Gogger, and your family, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Your family puts out very good newspapers.
Thank you.
So, okay. One thing with newspapers these days, I can't believe, you just can't believe what you read in a newspaper. I mean, everyone has heard this from time to time, and we still do. Misinformation. One thing I like to say, and every one of you will agree, we strive to be trusted voices. And by gosh, by golly, if we get something wrong, we're going to own it. But there is misinformation now more than ever. How do you handle misinformation or pressure from external influences?
One of the professionals,
Sure,
please.
I'll jump in. The thing that I always say is flood the zone with facts, which is not easy to do in this world where things that are posted on the internet and in social media can get picked up and go viral very quickly, and it's very, very difficult to counteract that, right? And in this moment, these are very fractured. Someone who sees a piece of misinformation may never see the counteracting fact or hear it, as the case may be. But what can we do, right? I think that it is about, when I say flood the zone with facts, I mean, I want Briar's newspaper and Lloyd's newspaper and their websites to be full of those facts, so that the same algorithms that have been tossing around the misinformation are lifting up those facts as well. That's one of the places to start, and to encourage engagement with the strong journalism that all of us do in order to create the word of mouth and the conversations around the actual facts on the ground, so that those are then delivered by people that other people trust in their communities.
Brian?
Not everybody reads the newspaper nowadays, of course. In fact, it's appalling how few people subscribe to a local news outlet or contribute to an outlet like hers. But we're there. And I kind of compare us to a paramedic or a hospital or something like that. You kind of want, for your community to be strong, you need to have that service there operating in the background, holding officials accountable, providing a repository of factual information, and even if you don't subscribe, it's there. And then when you need to find out the truth, there are trusted sources locally that you can relate to, that you can maybe kind of figure out what's going on. We see that around election time. We see this huge surge of traffic, people coming to the Seattle Times website when elections come around because they realize, oh my gosh, I haven't really been paying attention to what's going on. Now I've got to decide, I've got to do my role as a voter in our democracy, and where am I going to find some trusted information? They come to the newspaper. We see similar things. We saw things during COVID where everybody was scared, there was a lot of uncertainty, there was a lot of misinformation, and the news business, particularly local news, just saw an incredible surge of traffic and subscriptions and everything like that because people still trust these institutions to provide factual information when there's a lot of junk circulating around. That's why it's so important that we figure out a way to prevent its, basically its demise. Newspapers, which continue to provide most of this local journalism, they continue to fail at a rate of about 2 a week on average. The number of newspapers has declined by about 1/3 in the last 20 years. It's down to about 5,400 local newspapers. There are some really neat digital startups, nonprofits, and things like that are emerging, but they're still relatively small. I mean, we have about 500 to 700 of those in the United States. All of us are looking for ways to be economically sustainable and everything else, but we're competing with this exploding galaxy of stuff that's available and information and news of all different flavors that's available online. You pick up your phone, it's full of news. You turn on the TV, there's news for free. Everywhere you go online, we're being bombarded with news. But what's increasingly in short supply is authentic local journalism grounded in your community that's trustworthy, that is not going to be larded with misinformation.
I think the way we do it is we continue to tell the truth. That's why we've been around for 137 years. And if we stop telling the truth, we go under, our community won't support us anymore. And that's, like you said, that's why they came to us after COVID. You keep telling the truth and people will come back to you.
Yeah, I think creating that habit and that reliability is really important. That's something that we do too. It's important for the audiences, right, at election time to know that they can rely on the Seattle Times to be there with the actual facts of what's on their ballot. Something that we do in broadcast too is we call it the fact sandwich. This has come up a lot around things that some of our current federal leadership has said and done, where there are just outright lies being there, and you have to, because you're talking about this leadership, you might have to deliver what is being said. But surrounding it on either end, this is false, the fact sandwich is another way that we can kind of counteract that in the broadcast feed, where people may or may not come in at the beginning of a story. So that can be really, really important in figuring out how can we present what has actually happened, but surrounding it with facts.
Can I add something, Brown, too? Is we're not perfect. It's very easy to stand up here and, play the violin and talk about how amazing we are. But we make mistakes. News organizations like ours are vulnerable, just like individuals are vulnerable to misinformation. It's harder and harder to divine what's true. For us, that takes resources, that takes reporting, that takes editors, that takes people with experience. We have kind of journalistic standards we follow and processes we use. That takes a lot of time, takes a lot of money, takes a lot of effort. And as the journalism ecosystem is strained and the news organizations have fewer people working there and those people are under pressure to churn out more stories, the defense against that kind of misinformation is weakening. So it happens. We're not perfect, but we're always trying to get better.
And I think a couple of elections ago, you had something called the truth meter, didn't you?
Yes, we've done things like that, yes.
And truth really is, it takes some work sometimes, but you can really find out what is true and what is not. And I know the traditional media goes to great lengths. I mean, it's a cardinal sin to even go out there with something that you think is right. You have to, by gosh, by golly, damn it, we got to know this is right. So, kind of a little bit on that same subject. We're talking about the state of news business. Okay, you still have readers, you still have listeners. This speaks that your audience still trusts you. However, our audiences are indeed declining. In fact, they are aging. Okay? Can you do anything about this, or is it just something, declining audiences? Can we do anything about this, or is it something we just have to accept?
I don't think we can. I don't think we should accept it. I mean, it's a big, hairy question. At one level, I think it's about civic literacy, and I think we need to start in schools. I think schools need to do a better job teaching people how to be critical consumers of information. It's a really hard job. We're not really prepared for all the evolving new forms of information that are coming at us. Our kids have phones with TikTok on them, and are they understanding what's true and what's misinformation there, or how do they find a truthful source? So there's training the population to be better consumers of news and information is part of it. The business needs to improve. It is improving. We're all getting a little bit better, I think, at embracing these new realities. The newspaper business was kind of slow, but I think we're kind of getting there. And when I say newspapers, virtually every newspaper is also an online website now, and has apps and everything else, as well as printed editions. But the audience is changing. I think young people don't have the money to pay for news, professional news, so it's always going to be a challenge. It's always going to be probably more of a middle-aged and older product. But I will say that the Seattle Times, our largest cohort of online subscribers now are the millennial generation. So we're continuing to see that, successive generations are still paying for news and still value it.
Okay, thank you.
You have to give a damn in order to want to listen to, NPR or KNKX, excuse me, or read a newspaper. So, I think you have to meet them where they are. I think the Wilsons put the Port Townsend Leader online way back in the 90s, like 1996, and that's where people went. But I've had a teacher tell me, they would buy it if we printed it on or carved it into stone tablets. We are the only people, at least, in my niche market, writing about Port Townsend and Jefferson County. If you give a damn about your community, you're going to read the newspaper. We're not going after kids on TikTok. They're never going to be interested in a newspaper. Once you own a home, once you start paying taxes, you have kids who go to school, that's when you start caring. And certainly we can do a better job of making it entertaining. Trying to get people to pick it up, but certainly, you need to meet them where they are.
Yeah, I think, talking about people starting to pay attention when they're paying taxes, or they've got a mortgage, or they've got kids. That's true, right? It's part of adulthood, is starting to pay attention to the news. And so, for KNKX, we're a station that, for sure, we have an older audience, especially given the fact that we're a terrestrial radio station still primarily, although absolutely we have growing audiences online and on our social platforms, and listening to us through either our own KNKX app or the NPR app. All of those things are growing, but there's a certain extent to which, we're talking about adulting and people who are adulting. So, there's always the adage of measure what you want to grow, and there's a focus on that, middle to slightly above middle-aged audience that we're focused on for sure. One of the things that's kind of unique for KNKX is the fact that it is a very rare at this point dual format station, which is to say most of our daytime and evening programming is jazz and jazz-adjacent music. And stations like ours, and there's a handful of them in the public radio system across the country, have had stable or growing audiences when a lot of the news-only stations have been declining. There is something about the fact that we are giving a digestible amount of news, and it's like you listen to Morning Edition, and you're caught up, and now you can listen to music or move on with your day. And people come to us for that. I think that's also kind of the moment that we're in.
Thank you. And Amy, by the way, you have a very NPR sort of voice, too. I mean, she does. You listen to her. And so I have to ask you a question. This is real quick. Do you almost have to have that voice to work for? But I don't think you do, but that's a compliment what I had to say. You represent your station very well. Not just in your answers, but in just your voice. Very kind of soothing. Okay, let's talk about digital and social media. Has the rise of social media and digital outlets as well changed the way each of your organization gather and reports the news? I am thinking, surely it has. Has it? The rise of digital media. How has it influenced?
I mean, you can get a lot of information, but you can also want to drink yourself into a stupor if you watch too much of it. I think of it like you're trying to get a story from someone at a bar who's already had 3 to 4 drinks. Believe half of what they say, but verify most of it. But I mean, absolutely our industry has been changed. Sorry.
Wow, I can't beat that. That's awesome. I love that. But yes, when I started at the Seattle Times, we were still an afternoon newspaper. And it was interesting because we would put out multiple editions of the paper, and a story would break, and during the day we would write updates to it. And so it was actually really great training for the world we're in now. We got used to this kind of constantly updating and refreshing the news, and kind of the hyper deadline pressure. But yeah, it's absolutely changed. A lot of newspapers now consider themselves digital-first organizations. I'm a little bit mixed about that. I still think that the print product of the Seattle Times is kind of our premier thing. It costs a lot, costs more, but our whole system has changed. We primarily focus on producing news for the website, for the apps and things like that. The metabolism is different. The style of writing is a little bit different. The number of people have changed around. You have a lot more people doing digital production, digital producers, fewer copy editors working on the print edition. It's completely changed. We all think that the future is probably digital completely, which is too bad. The Seattle Times is now the only paper in the Northwest printing 7 days a week. I think we're the only paper maybe north of San Francisco that's printing 7 days a week. Some papers have just dropped print. Big dailies have, Atlanta has dropped print altogether. It's happening more and more. It's hideously expensive to print and distribute the newspaper. Gasoline prices, ink, tariffs on the metal we use in the printing press, all the plates, everything else. The cost is exorbitant, and the revenue is down. So digital is our future, unfortunately.
As a radio station, you talk about having to serve the website, right? We used to have a thing we called the Webify. This was really famous in public radio, where you would literally take a radio script and just kind of fill in the phrases and take out kind of some of the stage directions that we have when you're recording your script. It did not read. and they were too short often. They were just terrible reads on the web and didn't do very well. Thankfully, KNKX has evolved away from that, but it means that there's a whole additional labor that goes into what we actually present on our website so that it is readable for those people who read. And we have found that it is a separate audience. There is some overlap of people that might tune in to the radio station at some point and then read at other points, but it is rarely that someone is going to the website to do both, to both listen and to read. So it really has to be something that stands alone to be worth the effort. And now we're also doing that for social media, where we're creating increasingly vertical videos and other kinds of content that's destined for social media. So it's a lot more labor to distribute the same amount of reporting. So Briar has mentioned a couple of times about we at the Seattle Times and what we do.
two people that are sitting here, that represent newspapers, are newspapers that are locally owned. Lloyd, with his newspaper in Port Townsend, is not necessarily an anomaly. It is becoming increasingly so. Even weeklies are group-owned, sometimes even part of a public group. The Seattle Times is immensely unusual, being a locally owned newspaper for about 115 years now. They just transitioned into their 5th generation, Ryan Blethen. Frank Blethen, give me a minute here. This is really important. You guys need to hear this. Frank Blethen stepped down after, 45, 50 years? And Frank has always been very quiet about what he's done, but you talk about a journalist to the core. What he has wanted to do in keeping the paper relevant, important, and independent in Seattle is almost a legacy story now in the United States. About 3 Sundays ago, about a month after he stepped down, in fact, I think it was Linda Mapes that did this story, and the headline said it all. Why Frank Blethen spent his family's fortune to save the Seattle Times. That article, if you could, probably 2,000 words in the article, but that just summed it up. Newspaper people hate to be written about, but also are objective enough to know when there is a story there that's important, that's relevant to the community. First off, you'll have your reporters just hounding you. Frank, you can't say no. I'm guessing Frank didn't want that article written, but he agreed. And that is highly, highly unusual, and you work for a newspaper that many cities would love to have in their town. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to agree with everything they do, but by gosh, by golly, if something's going on, City Hall, county government, they smell something, they will pick up the phone, they will call, and they will ask questions. And that's what citizens that live in a community need to have happen. So,
Wow.
Frank Blethen and the Blethen family should be recognized. I'm glad that I wasn't necessarily supposed to do much talking, but I felt that was important enough to know.
Well, that's nice. I mean, it's really important that the remaining independently owned, locally owned news organizations survive. I mean, as far as newspapers go, they're down to just a handful of independently owned dailies. There are a lot more independently owned weeklies. It used to be just about every town had a couple of newspapers in there. There was a great local business to have. They practically had a monopoly on advertising. In the 60s, that started to change. The Gannett chain decided to go public and started consolidating and acquiring lots of titles. The industry just was battered by consolidation after consolidation. Each time the bankers in Wall Street would take a big cut of it. Next thing you know, more than half of the dailies in the United States are owned by a handful of big chains that are paying huge amounts to their financiers, and their newsrooms are hollowed out as a result of that consolidation. And that starts this downward spiral where the product gets worse, there's less reason for people to subscribe, there's less journalism holding fewer people accountable, and that spiral is continuing, and it's really a problem. So appreciate the great words about the Blethens. They're pretty remarkable. Not everybody likes them. Sometimes they make people mad, but I'd rather have a mercurial publisher than a hedge fund or a Wall Street firm, basically, on a newspaper.
Okay, speaking of the day and age we are in, AI. AI is in its infancy, but already AI is affecting journalism. Is this for better or for worse?
Speaking of talking to a drunk at a bar.
You go first, Lloyd.
AI is really good for marketing. It's really good for marketing. You just have to know that it's wildly confident and very wrong, and very confident while it's wrong.
Okay.
Very, very, very confident. We often use basically AI-assisted transcription tools to help us to log our tape. None of that is published. Like, we are manually checking those quotes when we're putting them on our website or into social media. But it definitely helps us from having to sit there and log tape in real time like we used to have to do. But fun fact, the transcription tools often get the call letters wrong, and we have seen it come up with the call letters of a different public radio station. So it's very obvious that it's pulling from a pool of slop, as they say, on the internet to generate some stuff, and you have to check it as a human being.
Okay. Thank you.
I think of it in three ways. There's the business side of, we're businesses, or a nonprofit organization. There's the business side and how they use it, and they're pretty enthusiastic about it. They're using it for writing memos or all kinds of things. There's the newsrooms. How does this tool work for newsrooms? It's great, for sifting through things and doing analysis of bulk materials and stuff like that. Some news organizations have tried using it for actually writing stories. It's been pretty problematic, and I think most people don't want their news organizations to be doing that. And I think if they do use it, they should be very explicit about it and clear where they're using it. The third bucket is that AI is basically eclipsing traditional search that we have spent about 15 years trying to build our business around to become visible on the internet and have you find the information and come to our news organization. And that's all just been blown up, basically, primarily by Google. So instead of the list of links, which might include the Port Townsend Leader or KNKX or the Seattle Times or KONP, there's a summary now of the news organization, and basically they're just wholesale ripping off news organizations and regurgitating our work and presenting you a little summary at the top, and the chances of people actually clicking through to the original site so that we make a little money from online advertising was already small, and now it's becoming infinitesimal. And I think this is an existential crisis for the news industry, and I think it's going to wipe out many, many news organizations unless we can figure out a way to get fairly compensated for our work by these organizations. It's interesting, the big AI companies now are having a bit of a hissy fit because China has been doing what they call distillation of the big AI models. So Google and Meta and OpenAI are now getting together and forming this group to try and stop having their stuff get ripped off online, which I think is kind of hilarious. So, sorry.
Okay, that's good to know. See, we are greasing the skids for you guys to have questions. This is good.
No, I mean,
speaking of questions,
sorry.
go ahead.
You make a really good point. I mean, I know I make a joke of it, but we use it in our newsroom, and it is incredibly serious. I mean, it's going to change most industries, but especially ours, because people are getting most of their information online now. So it goes back to one of your first questions about trust. So can you trust what your AI model is telling you? It's replaced Google, which sent them to our website potentially. Now it's just going to tell you what it thinks you want to hear, whether it's true or not.
Wow. Okay.
Not to be a bummer.
Two more questions, and then I think we're going to open up to you folks. So here you go. Not a fun one, but news is everywhere nowadays. There is no shortage of free news online and on our phones. Does it matter if local news outlets and regional and national outlets as well, does it matter if these news outlets go out of business? Does it matter, and why?
I think it does, and some people may think it's no big deal. So what? I have plenty of news available. I kind of use the diet analogy. Maybe it's a bit of a cliche, but there's lots of junk food available. But for communities to be strong and for us to be, good, engaged civic members of society, we need healthy news and information. We need the vegetables and the proteins and things like that local news and information provide. We know there's been a lot of academic research that's shown that when local news, particularly newspapers, go away, most people don't know who their mayor is. Most people don't know who the school board members are. Most people don't know who's on their county council. These are the same people that we expect to vote in elections. Of course, we all know everything about what's going on with the White House and Trump and blah, 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 but we do that every 4 years. Every year, maybe a couple of times a year, we have to make very important decisions about our local elections. And if we're doing that on a Cheetos diet of junk that we found online, you know, it's not a healthy situation.
I'm biased here because I want to keep having a job. But I really do think it matters. And one thing we haven't talked about here, and I'm representing public media over here, is that, you know, the last of the federal funding for public media has gone away. And very fortunately, with the support of many, many listeners and donors who are giving to KNKX, I think my station is on very stable footing. But I can tell you that Northwest Public Broadcasting right across the mountains has had layoffs, and they have cut reporting positions. So there are fewer colleagues providing news to the network that KNKX is a part of from that part of the state. That is a loss. And I can speaking to the public radio network and the way it works, right? Public radio stations, local stations like mine, pay NPR to carry that national programming and international programming that you are used to hearing. So if the local station goes away, so does the access to that information on the national and international level as well. And I as someone who really believes in the power of shared facts, think that's an immense loss. And what is going to fill that space, right? I'm thinking about radio, right? We just had the news that CBS is ending its radio news function entirely. There will, you know, where Edward R. Murrow began will no longer exist. And so what fills that space? In part, that's a question for you, Brown. You know, like what fills that space on the radio airwaves when the local broadcaster, in the case of public radio, goes away that supports national access, and vice versa. What happens when the national news broadcast goes away on a commercial station that had CBS News? Like, what happens to the local access to any kind of information in that broadcast pipe?
Thank you, Amy. Lloyd?
Accountability. That's what you lose. Short answer. You lose your newspaper, your public officials no longer have anyone to answer to. Same with your radio station, you lose accountability.
So what I'm hearing, it's unanimous, and I think we can all agree that it matters. It matters significantly that we have local, trusted voices in our community that truly are unbiased too. If there's a yang, you know, an editor's saying, well, there's got to be a yang. Go out and find it. You know, just really, you know, we need to present both. And so thank you on that one. Thank you. So I saved the best for last. Okay? So, it's a Friday afternoon, about 2 or 3 Fridays ago, 2.5 weeks ago. The location is Grapevine, Texas. The chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, Brendan Carr, took the stage at the annual Conservative Political Action Conference in Grapevine, where thousands of MAGA faithful gathered to cheer the movement's right-wing agenda. The chairman sat comfortably in the front of the crowd and bragged about Donald Trump dismantling of media outlets and the journalists who have lost their platforms. Look at the results so far, the chairman declared. PBS defunded, NPR defunded, Joy Reid gone from MSNBC, Chuck Todd gone, Jim Acosta gone, John Dickerson gone. The crowd roared with approval. If that were not enough, Chairman Carr continued, Stephen Colbert is leaving. CBS will have new ownership. CNN is going to have new ownership as well. So, continues the chairman, we are not yet at the point where we are raising the mission accomplished flag, but President Trump is taking on the fake news media and the president is winning. So let me summarize. Carr was not speaking hypothetically or abstractly. He was boasting about a deliberate, political, motivated campaign to reward allies and punish critics. On that very day, we heard the FCC chairman making clear that the free speech he claims to protect is being used as a tool in a partisan battle over who controls the nation's media platforms. For a sitting FCC chairman, an unofficial tasked with overseeing the nation's communication infrastructure in an even-handed manner and upholding the agency's independence, these remarks to a partisan political conference amounted to saying, quite out loud, I might add, the current administration views the news media not as an institution to be protected, but as an enemy to be silenced and controlled. My point to the panelists, and you, the audience, hearing those words from our FCC chairman tells us this is exactly what is happening. So, I'm sure the audience would like to hear, I would like to hear from you as well, your thoughts, and I think you know about that conference 2.5 weeks ago. Please.
Well, I've tried not to be too partisan with what I'm doing because I think it's a bipartisan concern about local media, and that is why we want to have a robust ecosystem of independent local news organizations instead of a centralized cluster all owned by a couple of big corporations that are vulnerable to or beholden to wannabe dictators. The defense against that is a variety of news organizations. They're weakened, they're vulnerable because so much consolidation has happened. That's why we're vulnerable to that kind of crap. I also think that it's absurd for conservatives to cheer that because the news media provides accountability. The news media keeps costs, keeps your taxes down. There's been academic studies that have found when there's robust local news coverage, your taxes are lower because there's less corruption. I thought that was a priority for conservatives. The local news crisis that I write about is primarily a problem not in Seattle. The Seattle Times is doing okay. It's primarily a problem in red states, in rural areas, in conservative areas. They're the ones that have lost their news organizations and are losing them. And when they lose that, they're losing their voice. They're losing their, somebody to represent them. There's power in having a local news organization that can speak to officials, that can advocate for their concerns. So they're shooting themselves in the foot, I think.
Amy, Lloyd?
I have thoughts.
I know this is one we could use the rest of it. Maybe someone will bring this up as a question too in some angle, but please.
I guess I have just some questions to put out there, which is kind of like the what happens next, right? So one, I can tell you that one of the other things that the FCC chairman has certainly flirted with going after in recent months is not just the government funding for public media, which is now gone, but also our revenue, and specifically how our underwriting is crafted. So that in some ways is scarier, because right now that is community funding that we're bringing in, and it is not safe under this administration. But I also keep thinking back to, I worked in Kansas for a few years, and I remember a ride I took from Garden City, Kansas, which is on like the corners where Kansas meets Texas and Colorado, and drove from Garden City back to Kansas City. And several times during that drive, I heard what sounded like a 2-minute news report about how the state Supreme Court at the time was supposedly stealing funds from school districts. And it was not labeled, not credited. These were on news stations across the state. I heard it several times during that 5-hour drive. And it was funded by the Koch brothers. That was political content created, but it wasn't an ad, so it did not have to be labeled. And I can tell you that both Democrats and Republicans in the Washington State Legislature produce content that is packaged as news stories that is decidedly one-sided. Briar knows about this. So, like, that's what's going to fill the space in some of these broadcast places, right? Is content that is partisan. I don't know quite exactly what it will look like in terms of newspapers and so forth, but certainly we're seeing it in terms of, Substacks and, podcasts, like Joe Rogan's the #1 podcast. That's what is going to fill the space. I don't know, Briar.
Yeah, we call it pink slime. Yes, it's happening. I mean, as we lose local news organizations, people still want to find out what's going on. So they'll gravitate to what's available. And what's available is stuff on cable TV. What's available is stuff on social media. What's available is partisan stuff that is coming at you for nothing. So that's, I think that's why we're in the situation we're in today, where everybody's so divided and everybody's so head up about partisan politics, and you can't have a conversation with people about things. Everything becomes partisan because people don't have the same shared facts. They don't have the same kind of community perspective on news and what's going on. And you see that in your local politics, where you might want to talk about whether you should pass a school bond measure or something. Oh no, it's all about, DEI and trans and blah, blah, blah. And next thing, it's like, what are you talking about? This is about our local school here. It has nothing to do with these national political arguments. It's just, it's kind of tainted the pool. So, sorry, I'll stop there.
No,
It's all good.
I think I'm more of a masochist than you guys. The really scary part for me is the applause. And I think what that means is they felt disenfranchised, and that's sort of why they go that direction, which to me means it's our fault.
Yeah.
Sorry to throw you guys under the bus.
No, it's true.
It means that we're not doing a good enough job convincing them to read the newspaper, to listen to the radio station, and that we need to do a better job getting the message out there. We need to adapt to the times and find ways of bringing them back. So that's what really worries me about it.
If they have a newspaper, or
Yeah.
if they have a radio
Yeah.
station, they might not. And so then all they've got left is,
Certainly.
So thank you for that, and as much as anything, I just really wanted to put on the table what happened 2.5 weeks ago from the chairman of the FCC, how blatant it was. That we are, he is speaking, if you will, for his boss. And that's the pressure we're under. So we are going to open it up to questions. There's a microphone here and here. And also, this is being live streamed as well, so it could be something comes in, if you will, virtually, a question. Please, there's also, if someone can't step out, there is a mic as well that will be brought to you. And then finally, when you do come up and we have someone here, please say your name. We'd like to know who you are, okay? You know who we are. Let us know who you are. And there you go.
First of all, thanks. Oops, are we on? First of all, thanks again for coming. Andrew May, as a side note, a freelance writer for the Peninsula Daily News for 30 years. You're probably aware, as many people are here, that just yesterday, and I'll dovetail on your question, Brown, the president was upset that the information came out that there were 2 pilots in the plane, and was very upset at the leaker, made a statement that not only is he going to go after the media, but he'll call national security. If they don't get information from the reporter, people are going to jail. So I'm curious, two things. For all your outlets, do you have a written policy or some kind of policy that your reporters know in this kind of case? The reporter gets to make the decision if he gives that information? Is it joint with the management? And has his comments of yesterday made you think that maybe you need to talk in your news organization what happens if something like this comes about?
The reporter would discuss that with editors all the way up the chain, and we don't disclose our sources, and we would fight to protect them. And that's costly. That's part of the problem. When the industry is weakened, it's more vulnerable, and it's more likely to settle or things like that. But I think that most professional news organizations would fight back hard on that. And we have lawyers, and there's actually some real interesting nonprofits that have emerged to provide legal support services. There's national organizations that provide kind of pro bono legal services to news organizations that can't afford it. So, let's just say we're lawyered up and ready, but at the same time, this environment is scary. Our organization has resources, but, if we could get smothered by a huge lawsuit. It's really scary that we're at a state where the president is openly threatening news organizations, and some are settling and giving him money, and nobody seems to be really that bothered by it. It's just astonishing to me.
I would say certainly my news organization and most of the news organizations that I have ever been acquainted with, if not all of them, are very judicious about having anonymous sources. There has to be a really good reason, and generally there is a long and ongoing conversation between the reporter and the editor about whether that source needs to be anonymous, whether there's another way to get the information, certainly having that information verified. In what way can you describe the source in order to communicate the validity without threatening the anonymity, and thinking about, the reason why anonymity is given is usually because that is the only way to get the story, and that the information in the story is of such an import that is a calculated trade-off to make, right? Because you have more credibility when you can name your sources. That's generally why we want people to be named in stories, is that they are therefore standing for whatever it is that they said. So if you don't have a source who's going to say that, you have to back it up with other facts, first of all, and you have to be willing to defend that person. If somebody else's lawyer comes, threatening in one way or another. So just to kind of put that in some context of what that is.
Other context is how seriously should we take this? I mean, we had the most spectacular leak ever when the Secretary of Defense, sent out a text thing and included a reporter on that and was telling him what the battle plans were for bombing in Yemen.
Yeah.
Where was the accountability then?
And there was a politician from Washington on that text chain.
Yes.
Joe Kent.
I mean, you guys put it pretty succinctly.
Sherry?
Good evening, and thank you for this excellent program. We're all enjoying it so much. I'm interested in my newspaper. I like having a newspaper. I like reading it, holding it, turning the pages. But I know for a long time the digital news has been so important and growing. And then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, all the business shut down, the advertising shut down, and the newspapers were really constrained because we went through that awful COVID period where your advertising revenue dried up, and everybody's coming back from that. So I'm hoping that our newspapers, our print version, can survive, and I hope to get some some good news from you on the future of retaining our newspapers, and are the advertisers coming back to the print news?
I can give you good news, but I mean,
Yes.
that's in Jefferson County.
Let's talk to the publisher on the stage.
Yeah, I mean, we've got more readers now than when I bought the newspaper in 2016. We had a big drop-off around COVID, but they're all back and more. And advertising is, I'd say, at the end of this year, I think we're going to beat what we did in 2019. So we're back with a vengeance, at least in Jefferson County.
Well, that's good news. Thank you.
We'll continue to print. Distribution is a challenge. Historically, advertising subsidized the production and distribution of newspapers. But as our advertising plummeted, starting about the last Great Recession, that's switched to the point that now subscriptions are a primary revenue thing, and they don't cover enough of the production and distribution. So that's the pickle we're in. So you've seen daily newspapers have reduced the number of days they're printed, like the one locally. They've also reduced the geographic area that they distribute. Seattle Times is trying to hold its own. Newspapers are also increasingly switching to the Postal Service for delivery because that's cheaper than working with carriers. That weeklies have done that for a while. I mean, it's fine. To me, it's a substandard experience with a daily newspaper, though, especially, if you get Sunday's newspaper on Tuesday or something like that. That's not a way to retain subscribers. These decisions are made not because they want to, but that's because what they have to do. Hopefully, they're stabilized enough that they will not reduce the print production and distribution any further. But I'd get used to reading it on an iPad. So.
Okay. So the person on the south side of the wall, I think you were next.
Okay, thank you.
And tell us your name, please.
Yeah, Joseph Kaminsky, Port Angeles.
Thank you.
Well, first, thank you all for being here and your questions and answers. I'm relating to all of them, and really appreciate the opportunity to have something like this. The truth, honesty, integrity, and being able to be accurate and account for is so important. I was a former news reporter back in the late 1970s, 1980s, Aberdeen and Medford, Oregon. And we're in a whole different situation, life, today than we were in the past. Things have really changed. And first off, I want to recognize John Brewer. I had a chance to meet him personally once, and incredible person. And I'm really glad that Barbara's here and that we're celebrating and remembering his life and his contributions. Our exposure to fact versus fiction. Fake news, I think many of us know where this originated from, the person who brought fake news out into the open. And some of the fake news is actually for real news, truth. And some of the politicians, given by some of the politicians. And some of the real news is termed by some as fake. And so we're in a very confusing time period. And so I really appreciate you bringing that comment up from the 2.5-week ago conference. Conservative conference that you mentioned. So important because it's very confusing, and it's really up to us, the citizens, to look at news, to listen to news, and to read news that they can research and understand, and question. My background is primarily radio. I have not really done any newspaper reporting, but the thing that I notice, and I'll ask a question here, if you guys have any thoughts about it would be the challenge of responding to intimidating questions. I think I've seen more intimidating questions on the national level, including from the president, than I have ever seen before. And that's enough to make a news reporter just shrivel up and not want to say anything. And it's a matter of confidence, having courage. I think we're seeing the need for courage like never before, because there's a tendency for news reporters to appeal to.
Okay. So can I stop you real quick and just say, can we get to the question here?
Yeah.
So,
the question is, do you have any way of mentoring and of helping news reporters that are working for you, with you, to not be intimidated by when they ask a question and how they deal with it? Because there's a lot of pressure going on right now for reporters in that capacity.
Oh, well, that's good. That's a good question. Training is important. Hiring is important. There are far fewer reporters. The number of newspaper reporters is down about 75% over the last 25 years. But I think that the people that want to do it kind of have a certain constitution. I mean, if you are deciding to go into the news business now, you must have a drive to do it. You don't just go in it because it's a good job, because it's a little bit tenuous right now. So I think people that are willing to take that plunge have the right constitution generally. I mean, I'm not saying they're all the same, and there's a lot of variations, of course, but I think I talk to people at journalism schools and students and things like that, and it's amazing how motivated people are to go out there and do this job because they think it's important, and they want to hold people accountable, and they want to inform people, and they're fired up. I mean, so there's a lot of people entering the field with that courage that you're talking about, so I'm hopeful about that.
As an editor, I work with a lot of reporters who are young, working right now with Nate Sanford, who's our Murrow Fellow, and doing excellent work. And he's one who at times has had to have some pretty difficult interviews with some local leaders. And so, we will talk through that kind of game plan in advance and talk about, what is the order of questions so that somebody doesn't shut down? How might they respond to something that is a difficult question, and making sure that you're prepared so that you don't get derailed in that conversation, and that you can, bring facts to the table of those conversations. It's, different with different officials, but, that's some of what we do to prepare people for that.
A thick skin is built over time.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
For me, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been brought to tears by someone before, so they can ask hard questions. And if you want to stay in this industry, you thicken that skin right up.
I shouldn't tell this story here in this county, but when I started working for Brown, the mayor of Sequim called me into his office and just ripped me a new one. Don't you mess with me. Don't mess with me in this town. This is my town. And I was like, ho, ho, ho. And then a little while later, I was driving down the street, and the deputy police chief pulled me over, and as I was pulling into a gas station, and kind of read, I think as a turn signal or a tabs or something like that. But it seemed like it wasn't really a coincidence that happened. So, I mean, it's nothing. Car isn't the first one. Put it that way.
That's a good one. Okay. Well done. It's a good story, by the way.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to have to take the bypass on the way home.
And it's tough being a young person in this business because you can be intimidated easily when you're 22, when you're 24, and you're 25, and someone's 55 and 65. And they can just look down at you and point their finger at you. Yeah. So, okay, sir, right here, please.
Yes, thank you. My name is Al Brady from Sequim. I'm a long-term broadcaster, been around since the 70s, and I want to commend all four of you because it's refreshing to hear you ladies and gentlemen talking about preserving the truth, kind of like the Superman thing, truth, justice, the American way, which is disappearing in the media. And it's really refreshing. I'm a new resident to Sequim. I came up from Florida, which is a completely different kind of media center. And I can honestly say, I've been coming up for a long time. I have family here. My question is this, and I've experienced it because I worked for a media company down there that owned the television station, the radio station, and the newspaper, and basically dictated to you what you can say and what you can't say, or else. So the truth can't be published, or wasn't published, or could be published. It depends on where the bias was. How do you keep that bias out of the media? How do you prevent the owners who are buying up the media, basically a one-company ownership and making a conglomerate, and stopping that kind of untruth? Because we, the people, I guess, of the United States, want truth, and it's disappearing.
Well, we have standards. We don't always meet them. It's a constant challenge, but we have news standards that we strive to uphold for objectivity. There's a whole 3-beer conversation about objectivity and whether that's even possible, but I will just say we have standards that we strive to uphold, and we are so dependent on reader support now that we can't fail there. That our future depends on people trusting us and believing us and having faith in us. And if we screw up, we're dead. So if we fail there, we won't be around. So that we have immense pressure to do better on that front. And we don't. Sometimes we screw up. Sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes we have, biased stuff shows up here and there. We have a system for corrections. We have ways you can contact our editors. You can contact the owner of the paper. Their emails are all on the website. So we're much more responsive to the public than that situation you were talking about in Florida. I mean, that's the positive about social media and all these things. It's democratized. There are no gatekeepers now. Anybody can publish. You all can go home tomorrow and publish your own news if you want. It's at your fingertips. It's in your pocket, the technology to do that. So that's also, raised the stakes of the competition and made it even more important that we produce a trustworthy product that people value, because we really depend. That's the name of the game now.
You raise a good point in noticing that the bias is often in the story selection, right? What gets reported on, what gets covered, and what doesn't. And honestly, that can be very hard to counteract, right? Because I think it's based on, it's dependent on who's in the newsroom and what their experiences are and what they see in their own neighborhoods. I am grateful. I'm not a parent. I'm grateful for the fact that I have colleagues in my newsroom who have kids who are in school districts, and they notice things that I don't notice because I'm not a parent. And so I think that's part of it, right? Making sure that we have a mix of people on our teams, and where we don't have people on our teams, that we're reaching out to communities to make sure that those stories are coming to us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you said that. Inherent bias. I think it's a mistake to say that our newsrooms or organizations aren't biased. We absolutely are. Life experience, how you grew up, where you live, when you grew up, and it's about being aware of your biases and being able to counteract them and having people around you who hopefully think differently than you do. But I wish I had been that guy who owned the TV station, the radio station. That sounds wonderful.
Okay, should there be one more after Robbie, we will take one more. Apparently there are. These will be the last 2 questions. Robbie, you were up here first, I believe. Okay, so yeah, the last 2 questions, okay?
So I'm Robbie Mantooth, and I was privileged to head the journalism program at Peninsula College for many years, and to be followed by Rich Riskai, another outstanding journalist. And part of what made our program so strong was that the family that established the Peninsula Daily News gave us over $500,000 for scholarships. And that money has now grown, I understand, to about $4 million, but we can't find, or people are not stepping up to use those for scholarships. And you can understand why it's hard to persuade people, and we've tried to do things like including this to help keep journalism going. And I just wondered if you have some ideas for us, because it's so important. A lot of the people who have gone through these programs have stayed and contributed to the media here.
Wow. Well, I mean, I presume you might be working with the high school. There's a pretty robust organization that does high school journalism, that represents high school journalism teachers, and they have a conference and contests and stuff every summer. Maybe set up a booth, make your presence known, and that publicize that through that organization.
Yeah, they could use the money to do that. $4 million is quite a bit of money.
Yes. That's where I would go, because that seems like your most promising crop of potential students is the high school, the cohort of high school journalists who are juniors and seniors and thinking about where they're going to go to college.
And to what Briar is saying, Robbie, I don't know the bylaws of funds distribution, but if some of that could be funneled down to high school, that's where you could really perhaps make some impressions on people still under 18, if you will.
Well, I don't have control of the money, but I think those are good ideas, and I'll pass them along.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Robbie, thank you for all you've done. Those that know Robbie in this town, she has done an awesome job. Thank you. Okay.
Hello, testing. My name is Lowell Rathbun. I'm from Squim. My question might be a little crazy, but you can tell me that if you like. There are certain basic public needs from the way I see it. We need to be educated, so we have schools, and public money goes into these schools. We need health care. That's a basic need, and the government is involved in providing health care to our citizens. Education, health care, food is a very basic need, and the government's involved in that. Housing, another basic need. The government's involved in that. So, and by the way, thank you for this very stimulating discussion. It's got me thinking, here's the need that I see, that I've been hearing all evening, is that the public has a need for the truth, okay, to be reported in an unbiased and factual manner. And why shouldn't the government also get involved in subsidizing that public need also in some kind of fashion? Thank you.
Well, you are channeling the founding fathers of our country, who thought the exact same thing. I mean, they knew that for our experiment in democracy to work, that they needed to have an informed public. And so one of the first big acts of Congress was to create the Postal Act of 1792, subsidized the press. And the discussion around the time was, how much should they subsidize the press? Then it was a matter of distribution, of getting distributing the news through this new thing, the Postal Service. And there were some, George Washington included, that wanted to completely, 100% subsidize it because they thought it was so important to support the press. Even though sometimes the press infuriated them and they couldn't stand it and things like that, they knew how important it was, in contrast to maybe some of our current leaders. That postal subsidy continues at discounted rate even now, although the Postal Service is a little bit more problematic now. Washington State has stepped up in some ways. They have waived the B&O tax for 10 years on publishers, and because they're so concerned about sustaining local news, which they see as a public good. There were a couple bills proposed in Congress that would provided federal tax cuts, tax credits, refundable tax credits for local news publishers all across the country. That almost passed in the Build Back Better Act during the Biden administration. There were also federal proposals to help news organizations collectively bargain fair compensation from tech platforms. That's coming back again, maybe now, to address this AI ripoff situation I talked about. There are a handful of states, New York, Wisconsin, New Mexico, have created programs to subsidize news organizations. It's not ideal. I wish we didn't have to do those kind of things. We should be independent. There's always a risk that it creates an appearance that we're compromised, that we're not independent if we have government support. But it is a public good, and that public good is disappearing. So I think we're at a critical point where the government does have to intervene and intervene more broadly, so it's not just a handful of blue states that have that support. And I think that the press has proven over 200 plus years that it can operate independent while also receiving various forms of government subsidy. I mean, you can attest to that.
Yeah, well, no more federal funding for public radio. Yeah, you know, I think in some ways it's great that we're free of the public funding, that now we are getting all of the funding that we have from the community. We're still accountable, very much so, to our public that supports us, and that's an important lever, but we're not, you know, in the winds of whatever is the political way, one way or another. And I think that's important. You know, thinking about like the ways in which the state of Washington is supporting the news industry, those are much more infrastructural, right? They're not at the point of content creation or reporting. It's a little bit further back than that, and I think that's probably where I would want to see it stay, with great thanks to the state of Washington for supporting our fellow. And yours?
It's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
That's a sticky wicket. We were actually talking about it before we came out here. It's such an incredibly complex issue. We are the ones holding them accountable. I don't know that I want to put them in charge of our funds.
Yeah.
Well, even nonprofits are subsidized. I mean, as a nonprofit, by definition, we have decided that what you do is a public good, and us taxpayers are supporting you and saying you don't have to pay your 20% to the federal government. So you already have a 20+% subsidy.
Yeah,
from
and
the
I say this
government.
while
So
using nonprofit funds in our reporting. Yes. I mean, it's incredibly complex.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I think Aaron Kennedy is going to come up, but I want a couple of shout-outs first. Barbara Weiss, Aaron might have recognized you earlier, but could you stand up? Spouse of John Brewer, Barbara Weiss. Certainly you have a lot to do with this. I want to thank our panelists and let you know they are sticking around. Also out in the lobby, upstairs we're not going to go upstairs, but to the left there's a lounge area and it's open for drinks. So please mix and mingle and say hello to your neighbors. And Erin, are you back there? Can you come out? And I want to thank Erin and her company, the Peninsula Daily News, because they are really the engine in making this happen. They really, really, really are. And thank you. And if you don't subscribe to the Daily News or want to Sequim Gazette, the Forks Forum, by gosh, by golly, you should. And I perhaps am speaking to the choir here because I think this is an engaged group, but I cannot tell you how often I'm promoting one of your newspapers and saying you should subscribe to the Daily News, you should subscribe to the Gazette. You can't give me a reason why you shouldn't do it. So please do that as well. And I'm going to let Erin close, and you've got a great team, what you do, and it's really important, and I can tell you that I, for one, am very grateful for the 3 newspapers on the peninsula.
Well, 4.
4? What am I missing? Well, I'm talking to Clallam County. You know, Jeff Coast, Jefferson's always kind of out there.
He's still, I don't think,
of course.
I don't think this microphone is on, but I will just say.
It's on now. It's right now.
It's on now. Thank you very much for these, what terrific questions from our engaged crowd for tonight. Thank you so much for attending, and I want to thank our panel this year. I had the honor of participating last year. It's really nice to see new people, new faces, and different voices in the importance of local journalism conversation. As far as the PDN, the Sequim Gazette, and the Forks Forum are concerned, I just want to note too that although we aren't independently owned, we don't have the luxury of being independently owned anymore. We are owned by Carpenter Media, but each one of our newspapers stands on its own merit. Peninsula Daily News, Sequim Gazette, and Forks Forum has an individual budget. If we have a deficit of team members in our newsroom, it's for two reasons. One, it's been very difficult to hire news people, reporters, in this marketplace, in a rural marketplace, and for the wage that we can pay. And two, you know, we've had some hard times since COVID, and you know, some of our stakeholders have had hard times too in terms of their own advertising budgets. And so as their budgets may have shrunk, then that directly, it doesn't indirectly, it directly reflects how we put together our papers every single day. One thing I will tell you is that we're committed to printing the Peninsula Daily News, Sequim Gazette, and Forks Forum. There's no desire to go to online only, because our subscriber base, that's what they want. They do want a printed paper. We have been forced to go to mail over over COVID, really, and that was because many of our carriers at the time got COVID. And we couldn't rely on that carrier force the way that we could rely on the news to get the news to you every day. So I know that we all wanted to have our newspaper in the morning, but now we turn to our digital app or our online publication. And I know that we've had to kind of shift, but here's what I love about this, and I will say the shift has been from our community because you're also involved and impacted in the local news, and the fact that if we don't get it right, you hold us accountable. We're your trusted news source. We stand alongside our partners in news. And that came down from John Brewer, right? And those before him, those who taught John Brewer how to do his job. And that continues on in me and in our team. Leah Leach, we have Leah Leach, the former editor of the PDN, here tonight in the audience. Thank you, Leah, for being here. Paula Hunt, who's had many years' experience as a reporter for the Peninsula Daily News, in our audience tonight. Thank you, Paula, for your work. Mike DeShiel, former editor of the Sequim Gazette, is here in our audience tonight. I want to thank you for your service to our community. So each and every one of you, I want to thank you for your work, for being here tonight. If you choose to invest in a journalist in the Peninsula Daily News newsroom, the John Brewer Memorial Journalism Fund is open. We have a fiscal sponsor, and that is, thank goodness, Steve Rader Ginsburg, the Field Arts and Events Hall, made that happen for us. Another local partner. And so if you've RSVP'd tonight, last year, or this year, you'll certainly get a message if you'd like to donate to that. Or if you'd like to make a donation to that plan, we're certainly willing to help you with that. So thank you again for being here tonight. And again, just like Brown said, we'll be out in the lobby if you have any more questions for us. We're happy to answer. Thank you.